Hi, Destiny Kids. We're in our series, Where is God?
I am Meredith Wood, and I am going to take a journey with you to find the greatest treasure. What is the greatest treasure? Let's find out. I said that you were the Destiny Kids. I totally believe that all children have a destiny. This is our sign about Destiny Kids. We're kids of value. We have hope for the future. We are people of influence. Totally believe that. We are children of destiny. That's you. You're the Destiny Kids. I'm Meredith Wood.
What is a treasure? And the answer is different for many people. So I thought it would be a lot of fun if we take a little journey looking at some of the famous treasures of our history. And we're going to look at treasures from all over the world as well. One thing we're going to do is we're going to look at an animal that is unique, special in this world, and only found in certain places, and very much unlike most other animals. Because that is one of the treasures God gave us, right? I mean, He made all the animals in so many varieties. So we're going to look at a unique, special animal from somewhere in the world. We're also going to look at an extinct animal. That's an animal that used to be on Earth, but there are no more, and they're all gone. There's no more of that animal anymore. So we'll look at one unique animal that still is on the Earth, one animal that is lost because of extinction. We're also going to look at a treasure, a famous treasure from somewhere in history. And this famous treasure is going to be like a treasure that is tangible, something you can touch, like an old shipwreck with lots of gold or things like that. And, so that's three things. We're also going to look at a treasure that is not gold or silver or things like that. Something that we treasure in our history. Can you believe people lose cities? They do. They have these huge, colossal cities and everybody uses them and they're famous and they're decorated and they're brilliant. And then, for one reason or another, the people aren't there anymore. Or something happens and the city is gone. So we're going to look at a lost city that has been found. So that's a lot of fun we're going to have. We are going to do so much treasure hunting. It's crazy, but fun. The first animal that we are going to look at that still walks the earth today is the platypus. Now, the platypus is a fascinating animal because when scientists sent the skeleton of a platypus to other scientists around the world, the other scientists thought it was a joke. They thought it was a hoax, and they didn't believe this animal actually existed. And they were like, "Oh, so funny, whatever." But no, it's a real animal, and this animal is found in Australia. Now, if you've ever studied Australia, Australia has so many fascinating animals. So what makes the platypus so different? First of all, the platypus is a mammal. Generally speaking, a mammal is a warm-blooded animal, like people, or mice, or rabbits. A warm-blooded animal that births live young, right? Not in an egg. But there are a few mammals, not many, a few that actually do lay eggs, and the platypus is one of them. It lays eggs, and they're not very big either, as you can see. Another really interesting thing about the platypus is that the male, the boy platypus, he has a poisonous spur on his back legs. One spur on each leg. And they can prick predators or things that threaten or scare them with this spur and poison it. A mammal with a poisonous spur that lays eggs. But that's not it. The platypus has a tail a little bit like a beaver, which is an animal found here in Canada. Quite a bit smaller than a beaver. But it has the bill like a duck, but with all these sensors along it that helps them find the food they want. And they have webbed feet and webbed hands, like a frog, right? But the cool thing about this is the webbing actually retracts so that when they come on land, they can pull it back a little and use their claws. So what a fascinating, unique animal. How many of you have been on a treasure hunt? What did you look for? Did you find it? Did you have a map? Did you have a team of treasure hunters that helped you look? That's what we're going to be doing for the next 13 weeks. We are going on a treasure hunt. Now you have to wonder, what is a treasure hunt? So hunt is a pretty common word. We know what that means. What about treasure? What is a treasure? Any guesses? A treasure is something you value. So what do you value the most? What would you be willing to hunt for? There are so many things that we value, and they're not all actual things. Some of them are people or experiences. And everybody has a different life. Everybody has different experiences. And the thing about a treasure is that a treasure might not always feel like a treasure. For example, you might have a toy that you think is so important. You value it, you treasure it. But then a few years later, you decide that you don't really care about that toy anymore. Or a book that you read and you just thought was the greatest book. So then you read it again and again. But then a few years later, maybe you give that book to someone else because you don't want to read it anymore. So treasure often is something that we value for a short period of time, not forever. Sometimes friendships are like treasures. We really value our friendships, but then as we grow and we change and become different people, maybe we feel like those friendships, we don't really want them anymore. We don't treasure them anymore. And sometimes people I know they work really hard to keep their friendship, and they have experiences together and they go places together, and it just becomes harder and harder because you're different people than you were when you first met, and you might not really be a good fit as friends anymore. So treasure is a tricky word, but there are some things that people always think of as treasure. Like people always think of gold when they think of a treasure. Now we are going to be looking for the greatest treasure. And we're going to find out how to find it. Because we're not just looking for it, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure out how to find this treasure. And I know that you already know what the greatest treasure is. If someone were to say to you, hey, what's the greatest treasure? Would you say, oh, gold, or crowns, or lots of horses? You'd probably know the answer is God is the greatest treasure. But how do we find the greatest treasure? Well, I'm going to show you. And the greatest thing about looking for God is that you'll find him. And that's our memory verse today. Our memory verse today is from the book of Jeremiah, which we have looked at before. And in this Bible verse, it says that if you seek me, you will find me. Now there's a little extra. It says, if you seek me with your whole heart. That means that you're really trying, you're looking, you're serious about finding God. If you do that, you will find him. God promises that you will find him. So here's a really fun thing about our memory verse. If you take out the words you and you replace them with your name, for example, in Jeremiah 29:13, it says, Meredith will find me if she seeks me with all her heart. Put your name in there. Our next 13 weeks are going to be about searching for God and finding God in different situations and in different places. So what do you think is the greatest obstacle that people face when they're looking for God? Because the Bible says, hey, if you look for me with all your heart, you'll find me. So why is it some people have such a hard time finding God? What do you think is the biggest obstacle people face? You're probably not going to guess it, but when I tell you, you're going to say, oh, that's so obvious. The biggest obstacle we face is that we don't look. We forget the seeking. We forget the searching. We forget the hunt. And we say, well, hey, God's everywhere, so why can't I find him? That's not looking. For example, here's a situation that actually happened to me just a few minutes ago. I had a child at the house who had to find their shoes. And I said, well, go and look everywhere that you put your shoes. And they kind of walked around the house and sort of this way. And I don't know why they do this when they look, because the shoes aren't going to be on the ceiling. But they look up here and they look down here. And I said, did you look in the foyer where the shoes are supposed to be? Yep, I looked. I didn't find them out. Did you look out in the tent? I'll go look. Did you look in the dining room, in the kitchen? Did you look? Did you look? Did you look? Then I said, okay, I will help you look. And I walked into the foyer where the shoes are supposed to be. And I went, are these the shoes you're missing? And the child's like, I looked for those. So, looking and seeking, hunting, searching, they're not really the same thing. I mean, I look with my eyes all the time and I see things all around me, but I don't observe all the time, and I don't seek or search or hunt every time. And that's what people forget to do. People forget to search.
Okay, so hidden under this tablecloth are 16 items, and we're going to do a little game. We are talking today about remembering to look for God. So I have a game set up that'll show you how important it is to practice remembering something. We often think that remembering is just a natural skill, and for some people it is, but for a lot of us it takes work to remember things, and we have to keep trying to remember and not give up. So this game is a memory game. Under the tablecloth I have 16 items, and I'm going to pull the tablecloth away and give you a few seconds to look at the items. Then you write down as many of them as you can remember. Then I'm going to cover it up again, and we'll see how many you remembered. Well, how did you do? Now I'll give you some time to write the items down. And while you're doing that, I'm going to talk to you about our memory verse. Our memory verse is from the book of Jeremiah, and it says, "You will find me when you seek me with all your heart," which is totally true. Don't ever worry about whether or not you will find God, because the Bible tells us to look for him and we will find him. It's not, if you look really hard, you might find me, or, if you look every single day, you'll find me. It says, if you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. I think that's really encouraging. All right, are you ready? Here is the list of items. How many of them did you remember? You can send an email to destinykids@rlcsimcoe.com. And don't forget, I'm Meredith, so tell me how many items you remembered and which ones they were. I'd love to hear from you.
Here's what we're going to learn about today that is not necessarily what some people might think of as a treasure, but it is. Long, long, long ago, off the coast of the country of Greece, on the island of Lesbos, there was a woman named Sappho. Now, Sappho was what was known as a lyricist. So she wrote lyrics, and they were like poems. She was famous and respected. And at the time, she was as well known to her people as Shakespeare is well known to us. Maybe you haven't learned too much about Shakespeare yet in school, but you've probably heard the name William Shakespeare. And Sappho was just as famous. And so many of her poems don't survive today. We can't find them. They're lost. But there are many published what we call fragments of her poems or her lyrics. And here is one. This is called Fragment 16. And it's just a piece of the fragment, actually. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing. But this is where she is talking about treasure, or what is truly the most beautiful and precious and treasured thing. So this is just a little piece of her poem. Some say a host of cavalry, others infantry, and others of ships is the most beautiful thing on the dark earth. But I say it is whatever a person loves. So here's some words you might not know, and I'll just explain them to you. Cavalry, those are warriors on horses. They're called the cavalry. The other word is infantry. And infantry are soldiers that walk where they're going. And then she says, and other people think of ships. So maybe navy ships, which is warriors or soldiers who travel on the water and fight on the water. And she's saying to some people, when they see a whole group of infantry marching by, they think, oh, that's the most beautiful thing. Or they see warriors on horseback and they think, oh, that's the most beautiful thing. But she says, you know, really, here's the thing. There isn't the most beautiful thing, because the most beautiful thing is always what you treasure the most. So I'm going to read that to you again. This is part of Fragment 16 from Sappho. Some say a host of cavalry, others infantry, and others of ships is the most beautiful thing on the dark earth. But I say it is whatever a person loves the most. There is part of the lost treasure of Sappho, the lyricist of near Greece. So, what is a great way to practice your searching skills? What's a fun game that almost all children love? Can you think of a game that has the rule that something is hidden and you have to find it? Hide and seek. You can play hide and seek, and hide and seek, the next time you play hide and seek, I want you to think about how hard you look for that person. And you say, wow, you know, I look in all the strangest places and the obvious places and the obscure places, and I look and I look and I look. That's how we're supposed to look for God. You're supposed to search, seek, hunt. And hide and seek is a great example of that. So, if I were going to hand out homework this week, I'd say your homework is to play a great game of hide and seek. And while you're playing it, really think about looking, the difference between looking and seeking, and searching and hunting, right? Because when you do that, you'll say, when I seek God, it actually requires an effort. Just like when I play hide and seek, it requires an effort. Have you ever played hide and seek with someone who's, you know, they walk around, they're like, well, you're not on the table or hanging from the ceiling, so I can't find you. And you're thinking, you know, could you try a little harder and make the game more fun? Right? Right? So it's the same idea. When you play hide and seek with a really great hide and seek playmate, you have so much fun because you can hide in the tiniest little spot and they look so hard. They search for you so hard. They seek you. And because they do that, they find you. So I have been looking and looking and looking at famous treasures from around the world throughout history for thousands and thousands of years of history. And I have looked at so many different lists. It's like, here are the top 10 treasures of all time. Here are the top 50 treasures of all time. Here are the top 6 treasures of all time. And do you know what? On every list, there was one item that was repeated every time. And that fascinated me because this item is from the Bible and it is listed as one of the greatest treasures of history. Do you have any guesses what that might be? The Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is first mentioned in Exodus, and they describe it in Exodus. And I won't read that to you, but you could go back and read it if you want to. But the Ark of the Covenant was kept in the temple of Solomon, the king. And when the Israelites were traveling, they would take the Ark of the Covenant with them, and it would go in front of them. They said the 10 commandments that were given to Moses up on the mountain were kept in there. Aaron's staff, which blossomed in the desert, is the other thing they said was in there. And a golden urn filled with manna. Manna was the bread that came from heaven every morning for the Israelites to eat while they were traveling through the desert. So those 3 things were said to be kept in the Ark of the Covenant. And there are so many super fascinating things in the Bible about the Ark of the Covenant. Like the Ark of the Covenant was taken when Israel was conquered by the Philistines. And they took it to their temple and placed it before the statue of their God. And I love this story. So what happens when the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the God of the Israelites, is placed in front of the idol of the Philistines? Well, they go to bed, and when they get up in the morning, the statue has fallen and its head's been knocked off and it's laying down in front of the Ark of the Covenant. I love that story. That's the power of God. God said, yeah, no, you don't put me at the feet of a statue. Your statues fall. Your idols fall before the God of the Israelites, which, remember, the God of the Israelites is our God. Another story that's super great about the Ark of the Covenant is when it is returned to the Israelites under the reign of King David, and he is so filled with joy that he dances before the Ark of the Covenant, and he's dancing and now I'm not talking like, hey, yo, I'm so cool dancing. He is leaping and dancing, and he's not wearing anything but, a little bit of cloth around his waist and hanging down a bit to keep his modesty. But man, he must have been getting really warm dancing in front of the covenant, and he didn't care. He was praising God with everything he had. And his wife says to him, you're the king. Could you show a little decorum and behave yourself a little bit more kingly, please? In a kingly manner, please? And he says, no, because I am so overwhelmed with joy and gratitude toward God, I will become as ridiculous as I can. I will become more ridiculous if it means I can show God how much I love him. And there are stories in so many countries about the Ark of the Covenant. And in historical record outside the Bible, there are stories of the Ark of the Covenant. And one of them is the story that before Babylon conquered Israel, that some of the priests that were in charge of the ark took it and hid it. Now people say, where did they take it? Where did they hide it? Well, lots of people have argued about that. But one of the really neat theories that I saw is that it's in Ethiopia. There's Ethiopia in the continent of Africa. It's in Axonim. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly. And it's in the cathedral that's called the Mount Mary of Zion Cathedral. So this was a really cool thing I found. So the myth is perhaps that the Ark of the Covenant is right now in Ethiopia in this cathedral, but no one's allowed to go and check. There is one person who is allowed into that temple to check on the Ark of the Covenant. He's called the Guardian. And so they said, we've got the Ark of the Covenant, we've got the Ark of the Covenant, and they won't let anyone in to see if the Ark of the Covenant is really there. So that's kind of a neat little idea. And maybe someday we will know if it is true. So that's one myth. Another one is that the Babylonians took it and they destroyed it, and it's lost for all time. But most people don't believe that. As I was reading up on this treasure, I found that most people really believe that the Ark is hidden out there somewhere, and that we'll find it again. Has anybody ever had alphabet cereal? If you have, this is a really fun game to play. Get yourself a bowl of cereal, pour it in, and see how many words you can make that how many words you can make that have to do with God. So if you find a G-O-D, you've got God. If you find H-E-L-P, you've got help. If you find L-O-V-E, you've got love. So pour a bowl of alphabet cereal and have a great time. It's a good way to have a nice snack. So So I have provided a link for you, and you can download a copy of our map. And when you do, the map is going to, you can have, there's two choices. You can either do a single page map, or the one I have here is a 4-page option. And what you do is you take it and you piece it together like a super fun puzzle. And then better. Okay, so once you've printed out and taped together your map, you will also find every week that I have provided something like this for you. And this is just like the ones that we have when we do our adventure with the godchild there. So what you can do, I'll show you mine. This is the one that I did. And it says, when we search for God, we will find him. And I have colored it and cut it out. And then I'm going to stick it on my map where it says lesson 1. Can you see that? No, you can't see it. There you go. When we search for God, we will find him. And so we're talking this week about the mountains of forgetfulness. How sometimes we forget to look for God and then we complain that we can't find God. Like when we forget to look for something else and we say, where did you put it? What have you done with it? And we accuse people and we're like, oh, I wish people would leave my stuff alone. And then you realize, oh, I put it somewhere else. Oops. So you can cut out your disc. If you do the 4-piece map, then these will fit on your map. Now they are a little bit bigger, so just put it so you're not covering up the words. There. When we search for God, we will find him. So we have to get through the mountains of forgetfulness. The mountains of forgetfulness, and actually remember to look for God. It's very important. So once you have done this, take your treasure map, roll it up, because all treasure maps are rolled, of course. Tie it with a ribbon, put an elastic, or even better, you can do what I've done here, and you can put your map on a wall somewhere. And every week, when we have a new lesson, you can take your disc that'll remind you what we learned, and you can stick it on your map up on the wall, just like I've done with mine over there. I also have included for you Bible Child. There you go. Bible Time Child goes on the journey with us. Yeah, so you can draw pictures, you can color your map, you can do whatever you want. Just have fun. Remember, if you print out just the single page version of the map, your discs will be too big. And if you're super clever, you can reduce them using your printer. That's up to you. All right, here is our lost city. This is the first lost city that I ever heard about. Okay, that's not true. The first lost city I ever heard about was Atlantis, which has never been discovered. Some people think that they found it, or they found something that might have inspired the story of Atlantis, but nothing concrete. So the first lost city that I ever heard of was the lost city of Petra. Now, the lost city of Petra is no longer lost. It was carved into a mountain in the country of what is now the country of Jordan. And look at the detail. Somebody carved this city. They had baths and a whole irrigation system and a pool and all sorts of fantastic things. Here's a Roman coin that has a picture of the lost city. Well, at the time it wasn't lost, of the city of Petra. So people in Rome, well, in the Roman Empire, knew of Petra. And Petra was famous. It was a trade route, and people would ride through the mountains, and they'd come to the city, and they would trade, and then they'd ride through the mountains. But as people stopped riding through the mountains to trade, then the people in the city of Petra, they started to move away because they couldn't sustain their living anymore. They didn't have people coming through bringing supplies of food and money. So one by one, bit by bit, the people left. And here are some images of the tombs where they buried the people before they left. Look at all those tombs. It's amazing. And so what happened was that when the people left and the trade route stopped passing through that part of the mountain, people kind of forgot about it and didn't think about it. And then one day, just out of the blue, you have some people, imagine this, you're riding through the mountain, minding your own business, you turn a corner, and all of a sudden there's a city there. A city carved in the mountain. And all of a sudden, all this history gets discovered. They could tell by the drawings on the wall. They could learn a lot of things. And the archaeologists came in and searched through the city. And then mention of this city started to be found in the historical record. And bit by bit, they started to learn more about Petra. Petra, to me, is a very super cool place. And I would love to go there one day. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't travel through Petra because right now, at least, there are these military groups of people who fight in the area, and sometimes it's not safe, which is unfortunate. Petra means the rock, which is why Peter in the Bible was called Peter, the rock. And Petra means rock, which makes sense because the city is carved out of the mountain. So yeah, if you want to look up a little bit more of the lost city of Petra, which is now the found city of Petra, enjoy. Now, our extinct animal that we're going to talk about is the dodo bird. Have any of you heard of a dodo? Dodo, it went extinct in the 1600s. So we're in the 2000s, and we're at the beginning of the 2000s, but they went extinct kind of in the middle of the 1600s. 1662, they kind of argue. It could have been 1662 or 1690. They're not really sure, but in the 1600s, the dodo bird became extinct. Now, what happened was it was on this little island near Madagascar. There's Madagascar. Now, the dodo was a flightless bird, much like a penguin, right? Which means that it lived on this island. It was always on this island. It didn't have anywhere else to go because it couldn't fly across the ocean. But what happened was a bunch of Dutch settlers on a ship settled on this little island. And when they got there, they found this plump bird. And it didn't seem to be very smart, which is why sometimes long ago people used to call people dodos if they weren't very smart. So it was plump. It couldn't fly. It didn't seem very smart. And some of them were eaten because, of course, like a chicken, people eat chicken, people ate dodo. But also part of the problem was that, unfortunately, when the settlers came, they brought with them animals that destroyed the dodo's eggs. Because it was a bird, it laid eggs, and the eggs were on the ground because it's a flightless bird. So the rats off the ship came to the land and they destroyed the eggs. Some of the other animals that were brought on the boats that killed them were pigs. You know, they brought pigs with them because they were going to eat the pigs. And so they let the pigs go in the wild because it's an island. Where are they going to go? But the pigs would damage the eggs. And it didn't actually take very long for the dodo to become extinct. Less than 100 years after the Dutch ships settled on the island, there were no more dodos in the world. It's a little bit sad. And for a long time, people didn't even think about the dodo or know very much about it. But one day, a man wrote a book. And in that book, he talks about the dodo. And where he heard about the dodo was he loved going to a museum called the Natural History Museum. And in that museum, they had a dodo exhibit. And that's where he learned about the dodo. So when he wrote his book, he put a dodo into his book. And that book became so famous all around the world that suddenly everybody knew what a dodo was. But it had been extinct for almost 200 years at that point. So the author's name was Lewis Carroll. Well, that was his author name. He had another name. Published the book in 1865. And the book was Alice in Wonderland. Now, if you've heard the story of Alice in Wonderland, Alice is with her cat, Dinah, and she sees a white rabbit with a pocket watch hopping by, talking and saying he's late, 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 and she follows him and she falls into a hole and discovers a whole new world. And in that world, one of the characters was a dodo bird. And that's why most people know of the dodo today. If you were with us for our last series, you might recall that we had a remember tree, and every week we would look at our remember tree. It would have something on it that would be a reminder of what we'd learned the previous week. Well, we don't have a remember tree for our treasure hunt. We have a treasure chest, and our treasure chest is going to have a different item every week put inside to remind us what we learned the previous week. Right now it's empty, but as we go on our treasure hunt, we're going to add things into our treasure box. Also, inside our treasure box is going to be something that we're going to put on our map to show that Bible Child, there's Bible Child, has managed to get through something. So this is week 1. What do we have in our box? We have a disc, and the disc says, when we search for God, we'll find him. When we search for God, we'll find him. And we're going to take our little disc here and put it at the mountain of forgetfulness, because sometimes we forget to look for God, and then we say, God, where is God? Where is God? Where is God? We haven't actually looked anywhere. Maybe somewhat like when you're supposed to be looking for your shoes and you say, I don't see my shoes anywhere. And then someone might say to you, did you look? Did you look where your shoes are supposed to be? Did you look outside the door? Did you look? Did you look? Did you look? Sometimes we forget to look. We just say, I don't know. I don't know the answer and I can't find it. I can't find my shoes. And sometimes we do that about God too. Sometimes when we feel like we can't find God, we don't realize we haven't actually even looked for him. We just say, I don't know where God is. I can't find God. I give up. Oh, it's so hard. But if you look for God, the Bible says you will find him. Not like other things you lose. Like sometimes if you lose your shoes, you might not find them. Or if you lose your favorite toy, you might not find it. Or other things that you might lose. Even friendships you lose. Maybe never to get back again. But God is not like that. If you seek God, you find him. That's his promise. And as we know, God's promises are true. So what do we have in our treasure box that's going to remind us to look? Any guesses? What might remind you? Well, let's see if you think the same way that I do. It's a map. A map will remind me to look for God. Now, why does a map remind me to look for God? Well, let's say that you were going on a treasure hunt and you had a treasure map. And you took your treasure map and you put it in a little treasure box and you carried it with you everywhere, but you never looked at it. Do you think you'd find your treasure? I don't think so. So the map reminds us that we have to actually look. We have to look for God. If we look for God, we'll find him. And if we look at our treasure map, we'll find our treasure. So we have put, when we search for God, we will find him at the mountains of forgetfulness. And Bible Child has gone past the mountains of forgetfulness. And then we'll see what challenges Bible Child finds next week that will help us in our treasure hunt for God, the greatest treasure.